little more background while Mr. Linwood is pulling that up. We are ready to submit the grant application. We know that that has been a process in and of itself. Mr. Linwood is simply waiting for some information from the federal government on some information so he can submit. And so we're ready to submit that. And so timing is about appropriate with the completion of the feasibility study. Thank you, Mr. Linwood. So again, tonight is, like I mentioned, just the feasibility study presentation. I want to share with you the results, the high-level results here, before asking you to accept the feasibility study and set the public hearing. Next slide. Again, project location, the red portion, the east-west portion of East Viking is the street reconstruction portion of the project, and the yellow portion is the street reclamation portion of the project. And I will note that in that north section, there is a bridge replacement there as well, and that is not part of this feasibility study. The costs are not identified in here. It does reference it, and that would ultimately be bid with the overall project. We think it makes sense to coordinate and have them all bid together, just for the sake of ease of managing and construction operations and coordination. It certainly makes sense. So that was what we're proposing. Next slide. Project schedule. This is again, and this is really in the feasibility study, it really highlights that this is really the best that we know at this point. Some unknowns that we don't have the ability or control of is schedule with the grant. And so we know that this project will likely move forward in some shape or form, but the portion east of Glen Oak was not in our capital improvements plan and would likely not be completed if we don't receive grant funds to complete this project, other than the bridge portion. And so to date, we've had the feasibility study ordered. We've had a couple of public informational meetings, and this evening we have the feasibility study being presented and hopefully setting the hearing. We will, prior to that hearing, have a third public informational meeting where we'll have residents come in. We'll give them a lot more detail so that they have information at their fingertips and can come prepared at that public hearing with questions of the council. And so you can see the rest of the schedule. We could potentially start as early as May or June. I do expect that to probably be pushed back a little bit further. I expect that the grant to take a little bit of time, but that's kind of our best fast track option there, but it could certainly be delayed to some extent. Next slide. Again, council authorized the preparation of the feasibility study in August. We've completed surveying, we've completed a lot of background information with televising. Some of that data was slow to come back to us, but we have all of the pieces that we need now. East Viking was reconstructed back in 1988 by Chisago County. There is continued surface and subsurface deterioration, so we are recommending reconstruction on that first section. The roadway is beyond its average life cycle of 20 years, and so we're looking at a 30-year life cycle with our next one, with maintenance, of course. And then there's some sanitary sewer and storm sewer that requires some information or some more detailed, in some cases replacement, in some cases, and so I'll get a little bit more detail on that. Next slide. Existing condition. This is a roadway where we probably received the most citizen complaints that I've heard, at least, and I think Mr. Linwood could probably attest to that. But it is a roadway that needs repair. The curb lines are not functioning. The roadway profile is not conducive for actual, good drainage. It's very flat, and so we have some really good ideas and plans for how to improve a lot of these areas. But you can see with the condition photos that are present there that there are certainly repairs that are necessary. Next slide. Again, this is the reclamation section, so this is a little bit more the northeast portion out towards Polaris. Similarly, a lot of pavement failures that are occurring there. This section is proposed as a reclamation, simply grinding up the asphalt with the underlying base, strengthening that road section and paving over that. And so that is what is proposed on that next section. But again, that's the existing conditions there. Next slide. So I just touched on this a little bit, but the proposed roadway improvements from Fenwick Avenue to Glen Oak is replace the deficient storm sewer and pipe structures. It's not significant, but there is a fair amount. It's not wholesale replacement. We are able to utilize quite a bit of that. We are looking at extending storm sewer to meet design standards, so we'll have to go through a little bit more detailed design. We've only done the very high level, but there are some state aid design standards that are present that we will have to expand some of that storm sewer. There's deficient sanitary sewer pipe and structures in one location. That happens to be where it crosses a wetland. That had settled as they built the road over that, and with that settlement, the sewer also settled. And so we have sanitary sewer that is operating at about 50% capacity. It's underwater. And so that is subject to issues, and so we know that we need to correct that while we're here. New chimney seals throughout to reduce infiltration into the sewer system. And there are hydrant adjustments proposed, as well as, well, next slide, Mr. Linwood. The proposed on the reconstruction, again, I'll continue, new recycled aggregate base, new or recycled, new curb and gutter, replace the existing sidewalks, new bituminous pavement, pavement markings, turf restoration, of course. Next slide. This is the section, the reclamation section. So bituminous pavement, reclamation, and new pavement. Proposed road widths vary to fit within the existing conditions. So the roadways vary from 24 to 28 feet. We're really going to try to maintain that actual footprint that is there. As we build a roadway and we reclaim a roadway, it essentially raises the roadway up. And so when we do that, we want to make sure that we don't increase the slopes on the road. We want to try to minimize the impacts there to reduce costs. And so in some cases, it may narrow by maybe 4 to 6 inches in that range. And so depending on the slopes adjacent, if it can accommodate being raised or not. Proposed pavement or proposed improvements along that pavement reclamation section is to add a number of hydrants on the way to Polaris. Public Works staff has very difficult time cleaning that line. We have flush hydrants every year, and it's a 16-inch main that extends miles, and they have hydrants at the end. It just doesn't clean the line out very well, and so there's some water quality issues there. And so we are looking at adding, I believe, 6 hydrants along that stretch for them to flush and improve that water quality there. Proposed improvements, again, this is that reconstruction section. It really highlights the roadway section we have, as we discussed earlier, narrowing the roadway slightly, still maintaining the parking lanes, however, trying to narrow and minimize the impacts for adjacent property owners, considering we are adding the sidewalk in some areas and replacing it with a slightly larger sidewalk where it currently exists. Next slide. Similarly, I talked a little bit about the pavement reclamation section from Glen Oak Drive to Polaris. Again, really maintaining that existing pavement width that exists out there. It does vary to some extent. Reclaiming and adding in our standard 4-inch bituminous section. So project funding, again, we're all familiar with this. We'll explain this to property owners again. 20% assessed for surface and drainage improvements only. So I referenced some sanitary sewer work, some water main work, some sidewalk work. Those are all non-assessable costs. Reconstruction assessments are based on a standard street width, and so this section is 44 feet wide. We'll only be assessing for a 28-foot road. That's what our standard detail is for our standard streets. We've had other streets in the community that are narrower, 22, 24. They're only assessed for that width that they actually get constructed to. In this case, it'll be 28 feet, which is our standard street section. Anything above and beyond that would be a city cost. And assessments are based on a unit rather than front footage. And we review the zoning, work very closely with Mr. Weck to identify what parcels are subdividable. Really in a lot of the areas there aren't opportunities to subdivide, but as we get out closer to Polaris and other properties, they're large enough to be subdivided, and so we look at multiple assessments per unit. And the city funds paying the remaining. So just want to quick highlight what the assessments look like here for this project. The total assessable amount, again, surface and drainage improvements only, less the oversizing width, is 1.87 million roughly. And you look at 20% of that, the assessment amount the amount that we can assess is $374,073. The parcels identified in blue yield a total number of assessable units of 53 and a half. You might wonder why half, but some of that is related to apartments, and the maximum number that an apartment unit can be assessed is 2.5. And so that's why you end up with a half there. So the assessment per unit is that $374,073 divided by the 53 and a half units, yielding just under $7,000 per unit. I do feel that this is conservative, like we typically see with our feasibility studies, meaning that the assessment is likely a little bit less than this in reality when we get to construction. But again, we know that construction prices are going to be raising this season, we're being told. And so we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that and that we're hopefully close with this number. But again, that is 20% assessed with the city paying the remaining 80%. Next slide. This is the reclamation portion. And so this is certainly a lot lesser number of units. Typically, when we look at a reclamation project, the assessments are much smaller. The units are much smaller, like we've seen with this last year's project where the assessments were more on the range of 2,000. Of course, it didn't have curb and gutter, it didn't have a lot of those things. So in this case, the assessments for this is, again, the 20% assessed, I'm sorry, the total amount for the surface improvements is 1.568 million. We take 20% of that and we yield an assessable amount of $313,669 spread over a total of 59 and a half units, yielding an assessment of $5,271.74 per unit. And so Polaris is a large property owner here, and so their assessment is quite large. And so I just wanted to quick highlight again the difference between the reconstruction and the reclamation type improvement. We really need to delineate and keep those separate. Next slide. The assessment process does follow Minnesota Statute Chapter 429 for public improvements where we have assessments of benefiting properties. More notice will be provided to all the property owners, and I think we're all familiar with this process, but at the time of the assessment hearing, written objection or appeal must be presented in writing and signed by the property owner prior to or at that hearing. And the notice of appeal must be filed within 30 days after adoption of the assessment. And again, the interest rate would be set at the time of the assessment certification. The assessment interest rate typically has fallen that 4 to 5% range, I think 4 more recently. And the assessment for this, since it is a little bit larger, we would likely recommend that 15-year period. I think I covered most of this. This is really just a slide that kind of goes through the process related to the 429 statute. And you can see we're pretty early on in this stage with just accepting the feasibility study and setting that hearing. And so we're at that stage tonight where we'll be asking for receiving the feasibility study and setting that public hearing. Next slide, Mr. Linwood. I'll stand for any questions that you have, and then we can certainly go through a little bit more detail on any of the items that you'd like, and then also looking to set that third public informational meeting for, I believe, the 12th. Is that right, Mr. Linwood?
That is correct, Wednesday the 12th. Yes.
Wednesday the 12th, and then also setting the public hearing.
Mr. Erickson, I do have one question. You talked about the hydrants and the flushing of the hydrants, and things get, I'm going to say stuck, but that's not the right word for it. It just, all the sediment doesn't go through, right?
Right, yep.
Is my understanding. So we're doing 6. How do you come up with 6 versus 20 versus, do you know what I mean? What is that right amount? How do you set that? Is it, what's the criteria?
So a lot of it is experience. We've worked with our water and wastewater group to help identify that number. We've worked very closely with Public Works based on their experience flushing the larger mains that they have in the community and trying to get a good feel. I think they want as many as they can, but generally there's some spacing requirements, and so that's what we base that on. We also have some limitations in areas where we can and can't put them, and so certainly along Carlos Avery we have limited areas. There's a lot of wetland. The water main is out within the wetland area, and we really don't have access to those. And so we've utilized and tried to maximize the numbers that we can reasonably fit within the areas that are accessible to our public works staff.
Okay, so that's a great definition of that. I know that they would prefer a few more than that, so that's why I
Yeah.
thought I would ask. So that makes total sense. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. All right, so I will go to council for any questions. Member Yeager.
The road will be sufficient to withstand use with heavy trucks, semi-garbage trucks?
Yes, so very good question. We have conducted soil borings, and when we do that, we identify what the underlying soils are under the roadway, and they're actually pretty good in most areas. Certainly, there's areas that are not great, and we have some underlying peat underneath the roadway, and in that section, we have identified some corrections in helping with bridging that material. So what we did not recommend in the feasibility study, and it is a good question, I probably should have elaborated a little bit more. I certainly have it in my presentation for the public informational meeting, because I know we've had some questions on that, but the section with the large dip in the roadway does have peat under it, so that wasn't a surprise for us. It's wetland right adjacent. That peat extends from 10 feet deep to 18 feet deep. And so we've looked at, what are some costs associated with that, and are we confident that it's worthwhile to do that? Most of the settlement that has occurred in that area has already occurred and will not continue to occur. It has stabilized with the weight that we have over it. So we're concerned if we were to raise or fill that area in and put a lot more weight over it, it would compress over time again, and you'd see the road failures that we've seen there previously. And so to replace and take that peat out, did some really rough estimates, we're talking probably $500,000. So I mean, it's a really large amount to remove and to haul in material. Not to mention we have our sanitary sewer that is up above that, so that'd be hanging in the air, which we're gonna replace anyway, but the water main as well, right, would be hanging in the air. It's just, it adds a tremendous cost to the project. And we, our geotechnical experts who have done the soil borings and tried to identify that are confident that we would not necessarily need to remove that as long as we don't change the elevation of the roadway over the top of it more than a foot. And so we are planning to keep that profile very close to what exists there today and not recommending removing that. More closely, I guess, to discuss the pavement section and the design of the pavement, this does have to go through pavement design review by MnDOT. This is a state aid roadway. And so we have gone through and provided that design, not only on this project, but our previous project as well, the first 2 blocks. And so we're very confident that we have a design that will withstand the traffic that is out there. And when we look at that, one of the major factors is the heavy truck traffic on that. And so they have a couple of different factors that they look at, and some of it's a little lighter heavy truck traffic, the volume, and there's another section, another component that involves larger truck traffic volumes. And so we've gone that route with a larger, heavier truck traffic. And we've also looked at that and made comparisons to what our truck traffic counts were when we did the traffic counting, I think back in 2015, some years ago anyway. And the traffic volume from heavy trucks in our design far exceeds what we were seeing out there when we did our traffic counting. And so we're confident that our pavement section is adequate.
You talked about the peat under that dip. You have a soil boring on the reclamation part that has peat 7 feet down. Will the reclamation be sufficient to handle that, in case that peat starts to compress into the muck?
Yeah, so most oftentimes, and I mentioned where it stabilizes, right? Where it initially, and a lot of times during construction, they'll load a roadway in advance and just let it sit and not actually go through, if they're gonna go through a method where it's not removing that peat, right? Or they'll use lightweight fill if they're gonna raise over that. But with a reclamation project, that peat is stable already, and we're not raising the roadway substantially to affect that and see that we would be compressing or changing the conditions out there.
Okay, and then the lifespan of this roadway with all the trucks and the modifications?
Yeah, so typically we look at a 30-year pavement design with, a mill and overlay mixed in there after 15 or 20 years.
Okay, so 30 years.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Member Schilling?
No questions. I just know this one's long overdue. This is a #1 complaint for me.
Okay. Member Onstad?
In July of 18, the bridge that we're looking at replacing was rated at 70.1 or some percentage. Do you know how much more it's deteriorated since that time? And is that indicative of how that road is going as a whole?
You know, the bridge qualified for funding back then, and we know that it has not improved. I know that we do that bridge every year. I don't have the number. I know we just finished our inspection here, I believe in October, and I just don't recall the number. But I can assure you that it did not improve. We know that there's, that it's continuing to deteriorate. I know that the approaches continue to slough into the river, and we end up with settlements in the pavement, and I know our public works staff is always out there making repairs because it is continuing to degrade, and they're trying to stop that from occurring, but I think there's some scour underneath the abutments there that are kind of migrating material in underneath the road, not over the bridge, but behind the abutments, and we're getting some settlement and issues there, so, yeah, it is certainly, I don't have a number, but it is continuing to degrade.
And then the second question I had was, I was looking at the lots that are being assessed, and in particular 31 through 38, that do not have a driveway that's on East Viking. However, it looks like they're being assessed. And I would just like to make sure that those people aren't being assessed a second time when their roads are being redone, or that they haven't been assessed. And I'm kind of wondering why they're being assessed if they're not actually on East Viking.
I will verify that. I will confirm that. I need to look at that, and I don't have my plan in front of me, of course, but I would be happy to make sure that I have that reviewed, and parcels 31 through,
38, on 267th Court.
If you bring up the map.
Mr. Lim, what I'm thinking is that,
There are numerous properties with zero assessment on it, zero
Okay.
assessable units, and with a magnifying glass, I think the
So-
parcels you're referring to might qualify.
I think that's a probably an accurate statement. So when we go through and we do this, we identify every parcel that is adjacent to the project, and we include all of them. And the assessment role at this stage, for the preliminary, really identifies every parcel, and many of them do have a zero assessable units on it
I do see that now.
in the spreadsheet. And so we just want to make sure that we go through, we number everyone adjacent to it. We want to make sure that we can tell the story, right? That if someone asks, well, why aren't they being assessed? We can look and tell them a reason why. Well, they have been considered, and it's a zero because they don't have their driveway access on the roadway. And so that is the correct answer for that.
Very good, Linda, thank you.
All right, Member Luker.
No questions.
All right, so with that, we need, I have to get my eyes on where we're at. We need to approve resolution 21-12-133.
Madam Mayor, we might have a question from the audience.
Oh, yep, come on up.
I just have a question that's one of our requests is, when we do have the neighborhood meetings and we have the hearing, at one of those meetings, or both of those meetings, would it be possible to have Ben Monska present? Could we request his presence? I feel that the county bears a lot of responsibility for some of the problems with the road, particularly when he's talking about the peak removal. That should have been done back in 1988 when they redid the road. And, you know, the fact that they gave the road away to the industry at the end of the road bears a lot of responsibility for what happened. I think that they should be able to, probably, we're all taxpayers along East Viking Boulevard, we pay county taxes too. And, you know, they should bear some of the responsibility. I mean, it'd be nice to hear what Ben Monska's got to say. He is the chair of that, of the commissioners now, so.
Sure.
I'd like to at least have them bear some of the, you know, at least hear out the fact that they did have some responsibility there.
Mr. Linwood, can you reach out to Commissioner
Certainly can. I
Monson?
can reach out to the commissioner and let him know about the meeting and ask if he could attend.
We could actually invite all of them. That might not be so bad. Invite them all. Okay,
Certainly could. Is that the council would like?
Yep.
invite them all?
Okay.
Perfect. Great, okay, thank you. All right, so we need a motion to approve resolution 21-12-133, a resolution receiving the feasibility report and setting the public hearing for the 2022 East Viking Boulevard Improvement Project. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Onstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 14, to consider approval of the City of Wyoming Emergency Operation Plan Update. Chief Hoppy?
Madam Mayor and City Council, we have in front of you a redraft of our emergency operation plan. I think you guys have probably heard me talk about this since about 2019, that we were going to redraft our EOP, kind of modernize and update it. With COVID coming in, at the beginning of 2020, it all got kind of delayed, and we actually used our existing EOP plan as part of that emergency operations strategy for mitigating our pandemic. But since we're at the tail end of that, we decided to get this document updated. And so what we have in front of you today is the updated emergency operation plan that we went through with our staff. We spent a lot of time on this, looking for best practices, really how to address and design the outline and the structure on how the city would operate under an emergency operation plan, making it not only flexible, adaptable, but sizable depending on the type of event that we have. And essentially, your EOP is your outline on how to handle an emergency operation plan. And within that, the different addendums on, if certain types of event happens, where is our primary point of contacts, our resources, who should be leading that, those operations under the umbrella of the emergency management, and how that should be handled by the city. So today we have in front of you the redraft of it for recommendation of approval by the City Council. The second piece, which is the next resolution, adapting the governor's order under a NIMS, the National Incident Management System, on also a supporting document. We, in the process of drafting an updated EOP plan, we looked at some of the supporting documents that really solidifies the authority and how it should be run. NIMS was issued by the federal government as a standard for emergency operations from a federal, state, and local level. In our research in attaching the supporting documents to our EOP plan, we found that we weren't able to locate an official adoption of the plan. It's not required, but I think it's just good governance as we move forward, and we always try to improve these policies within the city, that we kind of do some of that due diligence and bring in, to these documents some of that supporting groundwork on why we have an emergency operation plan, the importance of it, how it's going to be implemented, and kind of the standards behind how it's communicated and applied in emergency events all the way down to a local event. So the two resolutions in front of you today, one is to adopt the new emergency operations plan, and the second resolution behind that is adopting the National Incident Management System philosophy on how we manage those emergency events. So I'll stand for any questions.
Just for clarification, it's just adoption of the plan, no resolution, and then a resolution for the NIMS.
Correct.
Okay. All right. First of all, Chief Hoppy, I want to thank you for getting this done just before you leave. We appreciate
Yep.
that. How many hours did it take for you to get this done? I know you've put a lot of time and thought into this.
Yeah, and it wasn't just my crafting of it. We looked at a number of plans that were out there across the state. We chose a couple of model plans that we wanted to work off of that we thought were well designed, applicable to our city. It was tasked, with our crime analyst to do some of the just purely typing clerical work of it. We utilized other staff, like our investigator, who's a retired out of the Air Force and has experience working with emergency operation plans with the federal level. And then obviously myself doing the review of it and just kind of the final tweaking of it. So we certainly had a lot of man hours from multiple staff members, as we, compiled this with, really good experience to make it a good plan moving forward. And it's certainly a document that isn't forever. It should be addressed and looked at, every 5 or 6 years, just to make sure that the city's moving with, the right practices and principles, modern practices and principles. So I can't tell you the exact number of hours, but I can tell you that, our department worked on it for probably 4 or 5 months to really get it down to what it is today.
Thank you. All right, questions, and can we do 14 and 15 at the same time for questions? or not?
You should do them separate, actually.
Separately.
Yes,
Okay,
but-
so
yes,
we're-
for questions, I'm sorry, yes, for the motion.
Right,
Separately,
right,
yes, I
okay.
apologize.
So we're gonna do questions, for 14 and 15 at this time, and then we'll go to adopt. So, okay, Member Schilling,
I actually have no questions, because I just got done with one of these, so.
okay, your phone number is listed in there.
Mhm.
Member Onstad,
No questions.
all right. Member Yeager,
Being that we all like to put things on computers, will there be paper copies, multiple paper copies in accessible places of this plan in case of the scenario where the computers are inoperative?
So as we have in the past, we usually make a document that we can disseminate to the employees in a shortened version. So we'll summarize this document, have it as a handbook in all of the city vehicles that are easily accessible by our staff in the event that we have an emergency event and we can't get to our computers. But we also will have a hard copy of the document at City Hall, in the fire department, and in the police department, and at Public Works, in the event that they have to retrieve a full hard copy of the thing. But because of some of the, the content in there as far as telephone numbers and whatnot, it's not necessarily a full public document. Some of the numbers we want to keep confidential that are employee related. So those copies will be retained at those different departments, but a summarized version of it will be disseminated as we have in the past to all of our city vehicles, so they're easily accessible.
Thank you.
Member Luger.
I have no questions. I'm impressed with the detail of this and I appreciate the work and energy that went into it.
All right, so I believe I asked everybody, right? Okay. No, I didn't
But I
ask.
have no questions.
What is that? I have to keep in my system here. All right, so we do need to approve the City of Wyoming Emergency Operation Plan update. Do we have a motion to approve?
So
So-
moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Schilling. We have a second by Member Luger. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so approved. Number 15, Resolution 21-12-134, resolution adopting the National say that word for me.
National Incident Management System.
Thank you. As the basis for the emergency management operations. All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Luger. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Onstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes. My husband did bet $5 tonight. There was probably a word that I might stumble on, so thank you.
Okay. I hope he wins his $5.
Yeah, there you go. All right, number 16, to consider the hiring of Alex Sachs as Assistant City Administrator with a starting wage of $36.21 an hour with tentative start date of January 10th, 2021. Mr. Glenoid.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Staff has been in the process of conducting a search for a new Assistant City Administrator. We were given the ability via council to start this search previously back earlier this year. We received and scored 17 applications for the position. We conducted first round interviews on the top candidates, and then candidates from that first round were brought in for second interviews, and then a final interviews as well, and then through that they went through a skill practical and then a personality profile review. A complete background was conducted on the finalist. Alex Sachs was selected as our top candidate for the position. Most recently, Mr. Sachs has worked nearly the last 2 years at Dakota County as a management analyst, and Mr. Sachs has gained experience in administrative activities, research, project management, community engagement, and budgeting and finance. Prior to that, Mr. Sachs worked at the City of Lake Elmo as a deputy city clerk, where he also gained experience in administration, event coordination, human resources, policy development, boards and commissions, communications, and project management. Mr. Sachs received his Master's of Public Administration from the University of Hamlin and a Bachelor's of Science History and Political Science from the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Mr. Sachs is a member of the Minnesota City Management Association, Association of Public Management Professionals, and International City Management Association, ICMA. Based on his qualification, wage history, and experience, I'm recommending that we start Alex Sachs at step 3 of the position scale at $36.21 per hour with a 6-month probationary period per the City of Wyoming personnel policy. And with that, I can take any questions.
Mr. Linwood, I just want to make sure we know that he is not related to Stacy.
There is no relation. That is not made in our individual who works in our accounting office.
Thank
So,
you.
yes, there is no
Same last name, but not
relation.
relation. Thank
Correct.
you. All right, questions. So, Member Luger,
I have no questions.
Member Onstad,
No questions.
Member Schilling,
No questions.
and Member Yeager.
No questions.
All right, so we need a motion to approve the hiring of Alex Sachs as the Assistant City Administrator with a starting wage of $36.21 with a tentative start date of January 10th, 2021. Do we have a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Motion to approve by Member Onstad. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. So with that, number 17 is to go into closed session, but what we're going to do first is give council reports, and then we'll do a recess to go into closed hearing. So, council reports, we'll start with Member Yeager.
Okay, I attended the sewer commission meeting. We approved work for the Phase 3 project. It is on budget. It is, Phase 3 would be for next year. It would be working with updating our SCADA and process controllers, a chemical pump, load reactor, load disconnects for the chemical pumps, starter replacements for a couple of lift stations, and spare parts. We also, on the next page, we did buy a new generator, found out later that it was covered by insurance. So.
No, you're right, I know, I'm just.
No,
you're
like,
correct.
really?
No, you're correct. I'm just shaking my head in regards to the insurance. So, no, you're correct.
Okay, it was covered by insurance, we just have to pay $1,000 deductible rather than $42,000 for a generator.
1,000.
What?
Did you say, I'm sorry, 1,000?
Started with 100,000, but it came.
No, I said 1,000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
misheard.
That's that Jersey accent, sorry.
1,000, yep, got it.
And the plant is running really well, everything's in compliance, so life is good. With that, I'd like to wish tonight of the solstice, wish everybody a happy and blessed solstice, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and whatever holiday you celebrate, have fun. And that's my report, thank you all for coming.
All right, thank you. Member Schilling?
First, start off with thank everybody for coming in tonight. I appreciate seeing the faces. It's been a couple of years of lack of thereof. I attended the EDA meeting previous Monday. Everybody have a happy holiday and a safe new year.
All right, Member Onstad?
I did not attend last week's planning meeting due to other commitments, and otherwise it's been relatively quiet. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Happy holidays and happy International Flashlight Day.
Who knew?
Yeah, I did.
Who knew? All right, thank you. Member Luger?
I have no reports. Thanks, everyone, for coming and seeing the new year.
All right, I attended the Economic Development Authority meeting, the sewer meeting as well, the joint sewer meeting, the retirement of Mayor Emerson from White Bear Lake, and the Park Advisory Commission as well. And with that, I do have a letter that I would like to read to Chief Hoppy from Congressman Stauber. Did you receive this, Paul?
I did not.
Oh, well, it'll be new then. All right, so this is from Congressman Stauber. Chief Hoppy, first and foremost, thank you for the over 3 decades of service as a law enforcement officer and community leader that you gave to the citizens of our area. Every community you have protected understood the value of your service. The late nights, early mornings, gallons of coffee, and thousands of calls were all worth it. The law enforcement profession has changed a great deal over the last 3 decades with the advancement of technology and the way the law enforcement officers engage with the public and our communities to establish trust. As much as everyone in this profession, you have led well. Under your leadership, the Wyoming Police Department was twice awarded with the Excellence in Innovation Award by the Minnesota Chief of Police Association. That one is near and dear to my heart. So, you established community trust through the transparency you always brought to the department through social media. Together with your colleagues and coworkers, you were a shining light in our community. As one of the only members serving in Congress to have worn the law enforcement uniform, I understand the sacrifice you and your family have made for the safety of our communities. When you turn the page on this next chapter in your life of service and remove your Velcro on your Cavalier vest as you leave the department, I know you will understand the relief that comes when returning home safely for the final time. Your public safety career has been one of excellence, and we are proud of you together. We are excited for the bright future in store and whatever you choose to pursue. On behalf of a grateful state and nation, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just my last council meeting and final statement is I appreciate the support of the community. I appreciate the support of our elected officials, and I really appreciate the support of our staff. Because everything that he said there is true, relative to what we've accomplished as a community, and none of it is solely responsible by me, but rather the collective efforts of everybody in our community. So thank you, and it has been an honor. And so with that, let's have a good night, and I appreciate all the support that I've gotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will take a 5-minute break.